Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Will Hostler, the acting chairperson of the ZBA. Today's our regularly scheduled meeting of April 15th, 2025. We've got two matters on the agenda, but first we need to review the minutes from the prior meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes, and are there any comments? Or
I move they be approved.
Second.
second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. The first matter for today concerns the property at, we at 260?
Yes,
At 260 Joyce Court.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Zoning Board. My name is Eric Peach with Giffords Webster, the city's planning consultant. Our first item under consideration, as was stated, is 260 Joyce Court. This is for setback encroachment of accessory structure and a building, accessory building. The subject site is located in the A3 zoning district, so the A3 district standards apply to this particular site. As you can see here, it's located at the end of a cul-de-sac, which is Joyce Court. Last week, on April 8th, the Planning Commission approved a grading appeal subject to the approvals of the variance requests that are before you today. We'll go over those in just a moment here. So this is a general layout of the site. To the lower left is the cul-de-sac of Joyce Court. In front of the existing home is the front yard, highlighted in green. And then on either side of the house in yellow is the side yards. And then the remaining yard, shown in orange, are the two rear yards. So as you can see here, the items that are proposed for improvements are this rear yard pool house, or what we'd call a pergola, as well as the pool. So these are two items that are both located in the rear yard, which is essentially where the ordinance encourages them to be, as well as the pool fence that encloses the pool, which is a requirement, is also in the rear yard. So typically when those are located in the side yard, that requires Planning Commission approval, which we see quite often, but in this case, the pool fence is fully within the rear yard here. So as we apply the ordinance standards for the A3 zoning district, we create a table shown here demonstrating what the requirement is in this column, and then what's provided or proposed in the following column. So as you can see highlighted in blue, this is the pool. So the setback off of the north property line is required to be 40 feet, but in fact is proposed to be 28.78 feet. So that's an encroachment into the required setback. And then with that encroachment, the location standard, as you can see here, they're allowed to be within the rear yard and within the side yard, subject to Planning Commission approval. But this pool is located within the required rear yard, and that just means that it's within the setback. So it's those two items that you're considering for the location of the pool. And then the pool house, highlighted in pink, those are the standards that apply to the pool house, or in this case, it's kind of like a pergola. The location of it's required or allowed to be within the rear yard and side yard, and again, just like the pool, it's located within the setback, so it's within the required rear yard. And then the standard for the setback is 40 feet. In this case, it's proposed to be 21.09 feet. And then there's a third variance request because this pool house accessory building is detached from the house ever so slightly. The requirement for detached accessory buildings is 20 feet minimum. So in this case, it's approximately 3 3/4 inches, technically requiring a variance from the zoning board. So as we go through the plan further, as you can see here, we call out that there's a location for proposed pool equipment within the side yard, and the ordinance states that when that occurs, that the building official requires the approval of adequate screening for that. So we typically look for rear yard locations that pool equipment or other mechanical equipment can be located. But the ordinance doesn't necessarily prevent it if it's not able to fit. So in this case, it's located in the side yard, and we just want to ensure that it'll be adequately screened. So as you can see, a portion of the existing building sticks out. That'll help screen it from views from the street, and then they'll have some additional landscape plantings that'll help hide it from adjacent properties. And then again, the little zoom in here of the fence. This is what the fence will look like. It's just your standard aluminum black fence for a pool, and it ties back into the house at this location, all within the rear yard. So then getting into a little bit more detail, this is the north property line shown here. Excuse me, the 40-foot setback is highlighted in dashed red. So the existing house is shown here in a soft green. And then the first variance is, again, the pool. So the pool is outlined here. And then the portion highlighted in blue is where there's the violation of the setback requirement. Same thing with the pergola/pool house. The structure is located here, but where it crosses the 40-foot setback is highlighted in pink. So the second variance is the distance from the property line being 21.09 feet, and then the portion that's up against the house but not attached is the third variance. This location would be required to be 20 feet, further extending the accessory building out into the setback. And then of note, we want to explain that the existing home is an existing non-conforming structure. So the home as it exists today, highlighted in green, is a portion of the home that extends into the setback. So when all is said and done, if approved, the proposed pool house will slightly surpass the encroachment of the existing home by about 2.59 feet. So relatively in close comparison to what the existing encroachment of the house is today. And then just a little bit of background information. There were some home additions that were proposed and approved recently back in January. This particular piece of the home addition received zoning board approval for the algebraic setback analysis, which basically just said that there's portions of it that are too close to the rear property line based on the algebraic formula that's applied to setbacks. But that's just a piece of added information that you may recall from the January meeting. And then moving along to the landscape plan. As I mentioned before, this is fully within the rear yard. I highlighted the side yard locations just for purposes of getting your bearings on this plan. So as you can see, the majority of the improvements are within the rear yard where they're intended to be. It just so happens because of the configuration of the lot, configuration of the existing house on the property, that any improvements in that area are confined to where they're being proposed. As you can see here, there's a wetland that exists on the property, and then some contour lines that indicate significant change in the grade that limit any shifting of the proposed improvements in that direction. So we did work with the applicant. We've met with them a few times to go over those types of dimensional elements and difficulties. The city engineer was also involved in that, and they'll be here to speak on behalf of their review. But what we're looking at again is the areas where there's encroachments, just ensuring that there's adequate ability for screening. And again, it's not required within the rear yard, but because they're seeking a variance, there's a closer proximity of the improvements to the neighboring property. And so as you can see here, there's an existing 12-foot tall cedar hedge, and then on the opposite side of the property, there's existing 10-foot tall cedar hedge. And then some views from the actual property itself. This is the hedge.
Yep. Can you get back to the
Yeah.
The cedar hedges, are those on the neighbor's property?
Yes. Yeah, those are actually on the
So there's
outside.
no landscaping on the subject property screening current or proposed development?
For screening, it can be argued, right, that there's just soft screening, so 24 to 36-inch pillow boxwood in this location to help provide screening if there's ever any gaps that result in removals of those hedges, the 12-foot tall cedar hedge. So that would be relatively in this general location. If you squint your eyes, you can kind of see the outline of the pergola here. And then that existing hedge, which to confirm is on the adjacent property line, but it does provide existing screening And so
And that's not a concern of yours if the neighbor, for whatever reason, decides to remove that screening?
it's definitely something that the ZBA can consider, so that, you know, like I said, there's some proposed 24-inch, 2-foot-high to 36-inch pillow boxwood that will help soften some of the views. But in any case, the proposed pergola, the accessory building, does require screening no matter what, no matter where it's located. So if this was strictly a permit application, we would look towards proper screening, adequate screening, whether or not it had to go before the Planning Commission or Zoning Board. So seeing that there's existing screening on the outside by way of this hedge, that begins to satisfy the requirement. However, the ZBA has the ability to request further screening if for whatever reason those hedges were removed. The requirement for screening would be on the applicant of the subject site.
Did planning consider regarding the pergola screening? Was that, I don't remember whether that was.
Planning Commission?
Yeah.
It was approved as is. So there was a little bit of discussion on it, but what was presented here was presented to the Planning Commission.
You said the pergola is how far from the house?
The pergola is about 3 inches from the house.
Well, am I correct that if they attach the pergola to the house, it would be appropriate? So why don't they attach it?
That's a great question. So when the pergola building is attached to the house, it's considered part of the building. And so the primary building applies to the ordinance, or I should say the ordinance standards that apply to the building would also apply to the attached pergola building. And so the challenge that they run into would be another variance for the algebraic setback because of the encroachment into the setback, as well as an algebraic analysis that would be done for it. So they opted to not attach it and just seek the variances that are before you today. So the applicant, I believe, is here, can speak more to that.
Because by attaching it, it would have, but by not attaching it, doesn't affect the algebraic
Right.
computation?
Yeah, you don't have to apply the algebraic setback analysis to a detached accessory building. So that's why they opted to leave it detached.
So it depends whether we decide they can't do it because it's so far out of compliance.
If the ZBA does not approve or would like to see what the analysis would be essentially the same. There would be an algebraic setback analysis that takes into account the addition of the attached pergola, but the analysis that we did found that it does not work. So they're just asking for the one variance here for the encroachment, which is generally in line with the existing home, and that's kind of what they were going after, was not to excessively exceed the existing home's encroachment. But what the outcome is it's about 2 feet beyond the existing home's encroachment.
Can someone speak to the reason why they felt they needed the additional 2 feet? It seems like a small dimension to.
Do you guys want to speak on that?
Yeah, so the reason for having it where it lined up is it lined up with the pool. We had the pool 15 feet from the house to provide for majority of the patio space until we kind of hit the grading topography that Eric mentioned, where we were kind of getting more into that cut and fill. As you can kind of see, the majority of their patio space is in that space between the house and the pool. So pushing it kind of where we could. We did have it initially farther than where we have it today. We worked with Eric a lot and HRC to kind of push it to where it is now to minimize the grading that would be cut as well as kind of any encroachment that we would have.
There was a lot of modifying of the plan to reduce its footprint. So the end result is what we have before us. But as was stated, there was a bit more that was existing initially. So they tried to minimize as best they could with what they have, the encroachment into the setback. Yep.
And also, sir, just to go back to your question about the tying into the home, there's an inline gutter system on this particular house that lines up with the top of the pergola, which has its own gutter system. So separating the two allows them both to act independently.
3 inches seems ridiculous.
It's more or less, you know, adjacent to the building. It's just technically to address the ordinance standards detached, so. But again, looking at the screening in the rear yard, we have the existing arborvitae hedges, 10 and 12 feet in height. And then going into a little bit of detail of the pergola itself, you kind of see it's a 9-foot high structure. This area shaded in orange is the existing house. So this is one side, the right elevation of the pergola, and then on the left elevation, you can see that this is a wall. And so the wall has a TV affixed to it for outdoor entertainment. So as long as the wall is connected to the pergola, the accessory building itself, the wall is in compliance. The accessory building altogether is limited to a 14-foot height restriction. In this case, it's 9, but if the wall was detached for whatever reason from the accessory building, the wall would be too high. Those are limited to 3 feet. So we had to take careful consideration of that the wall remains attached to the pergola / pool house. And then if there's any discussion or concern over the planting schedule, I have the details of that here. And again, just the overall layout, again, showing some of the complexities of the characteristics of the lot, the wetland here with the natural feature setback, the setback restrictions highlighted in red, and then, of course, the rear yard shown here with the proposed improvements before you today, encroaching into the setback here. I'll take questions. Otherwise, the city engineer's here to discuss their portion of the review.
Were there any comments from any of the neighbors?
Don't believe so.
No.
How far is the house actually on the other side of their evergreens?
How far is the house?
Yeah,
Let me see. Okay, 23.68 feet.
how many?
This one here in the green, 23 feet,
Oh.
23.5 feet. And then just for comparison, what they're proposing will be about 2 feet closer to the property line than the existing house.
So the wetlands, is that, if I'm getting the orientation correct, is that in the southeast corner of the property?
Yes. Mhm.
Is yours the property where the neighbor built some significant boulders that somewhat created that wetlands? Am I thinking about the right property?
That's correct. The property to the northeast.
What, this here? This is where the wetland would be.
Right, so the
Yeah,
property immediately south. During the planning commission, the property owner was saying that his neighbor installed some large boulders that rerouted the water to the point where it's now creating that wetlands that now exists.
Correct. That boulder wall is right here on this line.
Okay. So it's not in the, I thought it was the property to the south. That's
No,
not-
sir.
Okay. Even though that's where the wetlands are.
Yes, it's in that southeast corner of the subject site.
But the boulders are in the northeast corner, and that's causing the water to go to the south. or-
According to the comment that you shared.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Good evening, Leah Michaels with HRC to discuss the engineering review. So this property was before Planning Commission last week and did receive approval for a grading ordinance. They do have fills up to 5.5 feet, and which is in excess of the 2 foot that's required per the ordinance. So when we talk about additional structures and impervious area in the rear yard as well as grading, we require applicants to install some stormwater management onto their site. with the goal of keeping the water on the site before it goes to the neighbors. So this property, water drains towards the front at Joyce Court. Previously, we had talked about the swale that they added in this area when we were here for the addition at the front of the home. Now, when we focus on the rear of the home, they are proposing a leaching basin, which is an area that is meant to hold water and slowly penetrate back into the ground, with the rest of the property going towards the wetlands that Mr. Hostler spoke about. This is the grading exhibit that was presented to Planning Commission. They do have fills in the rear of the yard in the area shown in green and blue. The blue was the areas that were 4.5 to 5 feet, with the green in the kind of 3-foot area range. As the applicant mentioned, kind of pushed this in, tried to minimize the amount of fill they had in the rear. They also do have a 3-foot retaining wall proposed in this location to also minimize the impacts beyond the area of the pool. So that was before Planning Commission. Just wanted to share with kind of what they reviewed last week.
So I should ask the question about grading to you. Any questions for the engineer? Thank you. Does anyone have any comments on this proposed application?
So I did want to add kind of from the previous.
Could you let us know who you are?
Sorry, yes, Sabrina Brown, Composure Design. I'm here on behalf of the homeowner, and I have builder Jeff Patasi with me today as well. I did want to kind of return to the screening with regards to on that north side. The neighbor's house is pushed farther back and is about 8 feet below where that hedge grade is. So they are significantly lower, and there is a sport court that is in between our client's house and their house, which would help kind of minimize any noise going to them, any hardships that they would require. All of that is pretty well screened just with where their grade ended up being, as well as having that sport court in between. So I did want to just mention that, as that was kind of something that we took in consideration with knowing that specific property as well.
Let me interrupt you. So, do you think that the owner is comfortable with, and this is somewhat conditional, but accepting the fact that screening has to occur for this project, and if for whatever reason the neighbor decides to take its screening down, that the owner would be required to install screening on their property?
The client is aware that screening is needed for these structures. So obviously if anything were to happen to the existing screening, we would make sure that he's aware of that.
So, this would be a question for the city attorney. Is this something that the ZBA can make it as a conditional approval of any application, that should a current site condition fail to exist at some time in the future, that this application and whatever approval may come of it can be revisited and the owner be compelled to, in this case, put in screening if the neighbor, upon which we're relying on now, removes its screening?
I would not recommend making that motion or making that condition, because it contemplates something that might not happen at a future date, which may or may not come, or may be many, many years in the future with a different owner. The ZBA is well within its rights to require the owner to install additional screening at this. I think that's a condition that is very normal and we would be comfortable with, but I would not.
How would you go about requiring it?
Well, can you, so can presently order screening, but hold the installation of that in abeyance until such time as the current screening in the neighboring property may not exist?
All you need's a storm. And it'll take the trees down. So, okay, who's going to, put the trees back up, you know, that's,
Or just the decision of someone else to use the property.
I'm surprised they don't do double screening.
Mm-hmm.
If you can maintain your trees under the changing weather conditions, which is becoming close to impossible.
Right.
The evergreens are so hard to maintain at this point. I'd like to do it your way.
Like we order it now, but
Right.
hold the installation in abeyance, subject to the city manager's discretion to compel the property owner at some future date, if ever, to
Mm-hmm.
install screening.
Give me one moment to think
Well,
about the,
Amy's got it.
Just as an aside to that, and maybe this adds a little bit more teeth to the enforcement of that, would it be appropriate to add to a motion that the building department schedules an annual inspection to investigate the condition of the landscape and at that point determine if the property owner needs to install landscape?
Well, but if they get an approval now,
yeah, right.
you know, without any reference to screening, then
Mhm.
we're imposing a new burden on the property owner that wasn't part of this.
The original approval.
Otherwise, they're saying, oh, they didn't think we really needed
Yeah,
screening.
exactly.
So that violates everything that we stand for, right?
We're not trying to impose a redundancy on the property owner now. It's not necessary, but in the event that it becomes necessary, because right now we're relying on somebody else to maintain the condition of their property for your client.
That makes sense.
I would ask the applicant, just for my own edification, is it impossible to install screening at this point?
She make the decisions
No.
for us, or can we
Screening
make
can
our own?
still be installed at this point if required.
Thank you.
I think what we would be looking at is, where's my pointer here, this area, general area, to screen the accessory building, the pool house, as well as potentially a little screening over in this area. Ultimately, it's the pool house that would require the screening, even in a rear yard. The fence in the rear yard does not require screening per the ordinance, so it would be mainly the 9-foot tall pool house that would require screening even in the rear yard. So since it's 9 feet tall, that would require landscape screening that's at least 9 feet tall.
Well, so we don't have a landscape plan here proposed today. Is this something that the city, the land department, planning consultant, and the city manager can at a later date determine the appropriate level of screening if we require it today, and you can later implement the location and size? Is that something that
I
is
believe so.
I think that's appropriate.
workable?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good. I mean, Eric kind of covered the majority of everything. I mean, just with the trickiness of this property being and the house being at a strange angle, as mentioned, we are pretty limited on where we could kind of design something that was aesthetically pleasing visually in kind of matching everything within the community, but also proportional to the house. We obviously have to ask for your approval today.
Okay, thank you. Maybe any other comments from anyone in the audience about this application? Does anybody on the panel have any questions or remarks?
It'd be worthwhile if our chairman made the motion and put the condition in.
Okay. All right, well, so I would move to approve this proposed application for 260 Joyce Court. And I'll read what you've got proposed and then add the additional conditions for landscaping. So the motion is to approve the variances from sections 24-299 sub B, sub 1, sub A, and 211 sub 10 sub A to allow a 28.78-foot setback in lieu of the ordinance required 40-foot setback for a proposed swimming pool in the backyard, a variance from section 24-299 sub A sub 1 to allow a 21.09-foot setback in lieu of the ordinance required 40-foot setback for a proposed detached pergola, and a variance from section 24-299 sub A sub 3 to permit a 3 3/4 inch, it's inch, right, not foot, it's inch?
Inch, yeah,
setback
yeah.
from the main building in lieu of the ordinance required 20-foot setback for a proposed accessory building. The applicant has demonstrated practical difficulty for the following reasons. Number one, strict compliance with the requirements would unreasonably prevent or severely limit the owner from improving the existing site. Number two, the variance would do substantial justice to the property owner as well as other property owners, as it would permit a home consistent with the other homes in the neighborhood. The homeowner met with city staff to discuss the proposal and reduce the impact and size of the proposed improvements. Number three, the plight of the property owner is due to the uniqueness of the property. The existing home encroaches 16 feet 6 inches into the required setback and limits the area in which improvements can be placed. Number four, the proponent's problem is not self-created in that the existing home already encroaches into the setback, and the ordinance restrictions regarding the placement of pools and pool equipment limit the areas in which the improvements can be made. Number five, the granting of the variance will not adversely affect the purposes or objectives of the master plan. The purpose of the master plan in residential areas is to allow homeowners the opportunity to improve the property while minimizing impact to the neighbors. An additional condition to this motion is that the property owner be subject to landscaping in the area being considered by this application. And the landscaping addressed in two manners. Number one, that presently the property owner, the neighbors, have landscaping which is being currently relied upon by this applicant for its proposed development. In the event that that landscaping, for whatever reason, is eliminated, then the property owner, well, then there is landscaping required by this motion, that the installation of which will be held in abeyance pending consideration from the city manager and consultants to the necessity to install new landscaping should the neighboring landscaping be removed. The other aspect of the landscaping is that presently the applicant will meet with the city manager and the city planner to address landscaping in locations identified in the map just shown to us, in areas that the city manager, office of the city manager and the planner deem appropriate in location, size, and genus of landscaping for the appropriate screening. That's the motion.
Yeah, it sounds like it's basic that they need to have landscaping by the pergola.
And to the discretion of the city manager and the planner to screen the pergola and other parts of the proposed development.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Good luck. Okay, we're on to the second matter. This one regards the property. The board, ZBA will consider the request of the property at 35 Hidden Ridge Drive for a variance from the required side and rear yard setbacks to construct a sports court and a variance from the landscape open space requirement.
Okay, 35 Hidden Ridge Drive. This is a similar application seeking relief from the setbacks along the property, and in addition, for the landscaped open space. The subject site is located within the A2 zoning district on the west side of Hidden Ridge Drive, which is a dead-end cul-de-sac off of the east side of Woodward, near the city center, just south of here. This is an aerial image of the site. As you can see here, there's an existing sport court and an existing pool in the rear yard. Last week, on April 8th, the Planning Commission approved a side yard pool fence and a 6-foot high glass rear yard sport court fence, as well as a grading appeal, subject to the items that are before you today and the approval by the zoning board of those items. So applying the yard determination graphic, Hidden Ridge Drive is over here on the right-hand side of the screen. In front of the house is the front yard in green, the 2 side yards in yellow, and then on the west side of the house is the rear yard in orange. So similar to the aerial that was just shown, you can see here outlined in red is the existing sport court, which will be demolished. And what's proposed in its place is this new sport court located further to the north, north of the existing one. The pool is located roughly here. I don't have it outlined, but the pool is remaining as is. But with the proposed improvements, you'll see proposed side yard pool fence that ties into an existing perimeter fence. It's outlined in kind of a maroon color, and it ends here where there's an additional proposed side yard fence. Those required Planning Commission approval, and as was stated, received Planning Commission approval last week. So getting a little bit deeper into the weeds here, the blue outline is the existing basketball court. It's approximately 1,300 square feet. It's about 6 feet 1 inch from the west property line. And just for reference, you can see outlined in pink is the 50-foot setback requirement for this particular lot, 26 to the north side setback and 34 feet to the south side setback. It's about 74 feet from the north property line, and again, it's to be removed. And then focusing on the green here, this is the proposed sport court. It's a basketball court of approximately 2,176 square feet, which is about 40% larger than the existing one by roughly 876 square feet. It will be about 20 feet from the west property line. That's this dimension shown here, and then 24.9 feet from the north property line, shown to the north there. And again, the existing pool is left untouched. It's outside of the setback shown here, but as you can see, there's a significant encroachment into the setback of the proposed basketball court. I'd like to note the adjacent properties to the north and south are A2 residential. That's the same zoning district as the subject site. And to the west is institutional. So that's a non-single-family residential zoned parcel. So then applying the zoning standards to the review, the items highlighted in orange here are what required Planning Commission approval. This is for those side yard pool fence segments approved by the Planning Commission, as well as down here, the sport court, fence and walls. I'll get into the details of that in a second, but what's before you again today is the rear setback and the west setback and the north setback in the rear yard of the proposed basketball court. The requirement is 26 feet to the north, and what's being requested is 24.9 feet, and then 50 feet to the west. 20 feet is proposed. So those are the items that require ZBA approval.
Eric?
Yep.
Could you go back to the aerial view that shows the adjacent properties?
Don't have one that's further out, but this is the I-1 institutional zoning district shown here. And then you don't get much of it shown here, but it's vegetated, wooded lot.
That whole folks on
Woodward Hills. It's the Woodward Hills.
rehabilitation.
One of the issues we've gotten into before, I know they're calling it a sport court, but pickleball courts have become a real issue because of the sound. And so we want to make sure that what we're getting into is not a pickleball court, because we would have to refuse that.
Well, so I'll let the applicant speak to the details of what's ultimately proposed. It's labeled as a basketball court, but the plans show that a net could be erected or extended across the middle of the court. But what's proposed, and I'll get to that in just a second, in continuing my presentation, is the wall, the fence, the glass ball containment fence is what's proposed to help mitigate any sound or noise that's given from, the bouncing of the ball. But before I get to those details, let me just cover some of the other ordinance standards. So the last item that is under your consideration is the landscaped open space, the LOS. So what's existing here now is 66.13%. What's required of the property is 80% of the lot to remain open. So the applicant recognized this as a challenge because this is an existing non-conforming percentage of open space. So what they tried to do in order to maintain that existing open space, because they knew they were adding coverage by way of the proposed sport court, was to find ways to remove existing coverage. And so by removing some driveway, that amounted to here, 66.24. So they maintain that 66% open space nonconformity, but because they removed some of the driveway, it's because the addition of the sport court is what triggered the nonconformity to also require a variance. So in this case, the diagrams that are shown here, which were really helpful, provided by the applicant, this is what was existing prior to the consideration of removing the driveway portions. Highlighted in red is all of the driveway that they're shaving off so that that red space can account for the additional coverage that the proposed sport court will take up on the property. So ultimately, the nonconformity of open space is not worsening, is what we were trying to get at.
The senior is the assisted living in back of that. So there isn't a house actually in back of that,
Yes.
where the sport court would be. Is there a house or is it the senior facility?
It's the senior facility.
Senior facility, yeah. Also to note on when analyzing the open space, this lot is unique, as are all the lots within the subdivision along Hidden Ridge. Hidden Ridge is a private street that acts as an access easement, so half of the street lays on top of the subject site, whereas across the street, Hidden Ridge, the pavement exists on an easement on that subject site, or project site. So we have to take that into consideration, which acts against them in terms of their open space. So that's just another feature that's unique that you may want to consider when considering the open space variance.
How far is the house on the other side of the property?
The house on the east, or which house are you referring to?
Well, the senior facility's in back, but on either side of them, how far are the houses?
I can speak.
Do you have that, Caitlin?
Caitlin Ferriero, Landscape Architecture. So the house to the north is 75 feet as the crows fly from the corner of the sport court, from the northeast corner. And then the senior living facility is over 400 feet
Right,
from the court.
that is not it.
The house to the south from the court, I mean, we're well over 100 feet easily there, 200 feet to the house to the south.
Yeah, I think you had a 75-foot dimension from the house to the north.
Yeah, I believe one of the commissioners measured it last week. And
Yeah.
It was over 400.
To the south, or
To
to the west. Okay, so moving on, we have some helpful colored renderings to help give you a perspective of what we're looking at in terms of the sport court, as well as the proposed ball enclosure. So just to give you a little, did you have questions?
Yeah, that's obviously not accurate, because the planning commission's already approved 6.
Yes, and I thought I changed that, sorry. Yeah, I have it here, and I thought I changed it. Yeah, so, in red. So,
All the way around.
right, so what I want to explain to you here on this slide is that in the rear yard, so we are talking about a rear yard, so this enclosure here in blue, fences can be permitted up to 6 feet in height without having to go to the Planning Commission or the Zoning Board of Appeals. So those can be approved administratively up to 6 feet in height. What was originally proposed to the Planning Commission was what you see here. On the west side of the court is a 10-foot high backdrop. On either side or either ends of the sport court was an 8-foot high glass wall, all of the same material and the same structure. And then over here on the house side of the sport court was a 4-foot high structure. So in deliberation and discussion with the Planning Commission, the thought was that they would be in support of this sport court being within the setback, subject to the zoning board's consideration for approval, that there would be a consistent height amongst the ball containment structure. And what this is a new product that the applicant will go into the details on to discuss some of the details and qualities that the fence is intended for. And one of the most significant uses or intentions of it is for noise containment. And so that's why having a consistent height throughout or around the court is ideal. And so the thought was that 6 feet would be essentially what the Planning Commission would have liked to see, and so that's how they made their motion to approve, was subject to a 6-foot fence, or what you see here, this ball containment structure around the perimeter of the sport court.
It's glass, but they'll describe it. It's
Is that in here? Is that in our material, proposed approval?
Well,
The material, yeah.
Is the composite of the wall part of what we need to approve?
No, not the material, no, just the height. But at 6 feet, which is what this now has changed to, and I have that shown here again, the 6-foot height meets the ordinance for the rear yard fence. But what ties it to your consideration today is that the Planning Commission, subject to their consideration, they conditioned their approval on a 6-foot. So it has to be 6 feet. And that was because of its location within the rear yard setback.
Do we have that in our proposed motion too, or do we need it?
So that may not have gotten updated for the motion, since that was
The
changed.
size, the Planning Commission also considered the sound mitigation being
Correct.
a big issue
Right,
because of pickleball.
right, and you can see here that basketball court with the basketball net, and then a net extended across the court area for either tennis or pickleball. So the sound is something that was taken into serious consideration. The applicant understands and realizes, which is why they proposed this type of structure, ball containment, in the first place. And then it was with Planning Commission's deliberation and consideration of sound that they conditioned their approval on the 6-foot, consistent throughout, so that noise can escape on the lower portions of the containment fence, that they subject their motion to a 6-foot high consistent fence. So then we'll just go through the rest of the slides here. This is an aerial looking towards the house with the red setback requirement. That's a 50-foot setback requirement. Again, the pool stays as is. Sport court requires ZBA approval. And then an overall landscape plan. Planning Commission took into consideration the side yard fences here with screening on both sides of the house. But it's back here where there's additional screening that the zoning board may consider as adequate screening for the sport court in the rear yard. So again, this is the arborvitae shown along the proposed fence. There's an existing tree coverage along the perimeter of the site that will remain untouched and as is to maintain the screening capacity. And then this is the side yard here, side yard fence with the proposed screening. And then it's once you hit here that you're in the rear yard. which the sport court as a proposed accessory structure does not require screening if it was not within the setback, but because it's in the setback, we feel like an adequate amount of screening for landscaping is appropriate, and so the applicant provided all of that shown here. You have 10 to 12 foot and 12 to 14 foot green giant arborvitae, 10 to 12 foot and 18 to 20 foot Norway spruce, alpine fir, shrub rose, which is the lower shrubbery, serviceberry, got 3 of those, some dogwood, and then pockets of hydrangea to help accentuate further of the lower screening.
So, here, that's all proposed, right?
Yes, correct.
So the reference to existing natural area to be left largely as is, is that depicted anywhere in any of your material?
On the landscape plan or just like in
Yeah, I mean,
photos?
that-
Here we
so,
go.
for example, that picture you just went
Yeah.
past with the garage or the building, right there.
Yeah.
That's just an example, right? That's not the actual.
These are the example of
the
what's
type of tree-
the
yeah.
screening of the
Right.
proposed fence, right? So that species is the green giant
Proposed.
arborvitae
Yeah.
to screen the side yard fence. And then this area behind is just some natural area that you'll see in some of the photos. But the intent is to show here that this is all gonna be remain untouched, this
Right,
natural
do we
area.
have a picture of what that looks like?
Yes, I'll show you that in just a second. We got a whole bunch of pictures. So pay attention to this little diagram here showing the direction that we're looking on the lot. So in this case, we're looking north, northeast towards the adjacent property. Looking south towards the existing pool, and then with the grading changes that will be made, this is where the sport court will be constructed. Looking east, southeast towards the home with the existing pool. And then this is some of that existing natural area on the back side of the property. So this is looking west from the sport court, the proposed sport court. Here you can see some of the existing sport court, which again will be removed. Looking towards the house. These pictures are a few months old, hence the snow. This is looking towards the south property line. And then here you can see that natural area all along here, the west property line. And again, that's rear yard, so it doesn't necessarily require screening. But again, that's something that the ZBA can take into consideration. So looking from the street, most of the improvements are behind the house on the north side, back in this area. So there's not much visibility that you would see from the street. But we take steps back further into the property as we go. The existing pool, so the improvements will be back here. Looking north again. And then similar to the last project that we looked at on Joyce Court, there's a side yard mechanical equipment, and that will be located here. And so they have this large tree that will remain, and then I believe like 5-foot arborvitae. There was a slide somewhere that'll show that, but we do take into account that they will have that adequately screened, but it's subject to the building officials' review and approval upon final inspection.
Can we look at the view from the street?
Yep.
So, yeah. Is there, in the landscape proposed that you had previously shown, is there landscaping anticipated for this view in the back, so someone on the street can't look through and see all the new activity?
So views from the street, here's the fence and the gate from that view that we were just looking at. So you have hydrangea. This one would be Norway spruce. And then additional screening all in this area that would help prevent views from the street, in my opinion. Going,
Speak to it too, as the homeowner, I don't wanna see the street from my pool. So yes, there will be adequate screening, yeah.
Yeah, the proposed fence that was approved last week is heavily screened,
Yeah.
so the only
Oh,
gap
okay.
is the gate, but beyond the gate, you can see there's
The other is grade. There's a dry, I can't speak to how much, but at least 5 feet, I would say, as I stand there. When I'm on the pool deck, I.
So you're the owner, what's your name? I'm sorry.
Mike Madigan. Yes. Because it sits lower at grade than what this, it's similar to street, but there's a hill there that you don't see. I really don't see the street from my backyard or side yard at all, nor can you see obviously from the street to the backyard. But we want to screen adequately, not just, so the pool equipment is compliant, and all those sorts of things. We're moving it, it's not compliant now, we're moving it so it is compliant. And we don't want to see it from the pool nor hear it run, any more than my neighbor wants to hear it run. So we're getting it closer, John's got that arranged, and we'll screen that appropriately.
So the screening that we're seeing right there and another picture is if you're driving down Hidden Ridge and you look on that, the north side of your property, no, east side of your property.
Yeah, like the east side of the
Yeah,
road there.
you're not gonna be able to see in the back.
Correct.
The idea, first and foremost, as Caitlin was saying, is to screen the fence in the side yard. So that provides the first layer of landscape screening, and then everything behind the fence would provide that additional
Is that the property line right there?
over here.
Yeah.
This is the north property line.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or the east?
East would be down. So let's see if I
And
can,
there is a roughly 5 foot grade change from street level to pool deck level.
okay.
Just for reference.
Yeah, so on this map here, you're looking from the street into the property, that's a westward direction. So this is that fence that you would see.
But it's the north property line.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But it's sitting below that view from the street.
Right.
I don't think you'll see the fence at all. We're going to screen it because we don't necessarily want to see the fence either.
And then going back to that discussion about the existing tree coverage along the perimeter, that's what you see there. Due to the lighting, it's a little tricky, but it should fill in nicely when the leaves come out. And then last, just an artist rendering showing from the back property line to the west, looking into the property. This would be where the sport court would be located, and then the glass containment area with the existing pool and some of the nice improvements to the hardscape as well. So that concludes my presentation. City engineers here to discuss the grade changes that the Planning Commission did approve at their meeting. But just to give full perspective, Leah's here to talk about that.
Anyone have any more questions for Eric? Thank you.
Similarly to the last property, this one also had a grading variance that went before Planning Commission last week. There are areas where there's fills proposed of up to 4 feet and some cuts up to 3 feet. So we'll start with the grading on this one. So here is the proposed sport court that we've been talking about. Outlined in this area very faintly is the existing sport court. So the purple area is some cut that's needed, which is from the existing sport court to make the proposed one in its new location. And then the blue color is some fill areas. This is a stairway that has some fill, as well as the other part of the proposed sport court had some fills in the 2 to 3 foot area. And then a little bit of yellow, that's the 3 to 4 foot fill. So this was before Planning Commission, and they did approve this grading variance. As we mentioned, we talk about drainage specifically for these properties. The property itself drains towards the road in the front, and there is a private storm sewer system on Hidden Ridge. The rear, they are adding some structures into the back, again, to contain the water on the property. There is some existing storm sewer that the property owner has cleaned out and did some modifications to. So they are proposing some additional storm management around the sport court that will tie in with the existing structure that leads to the road. So we do feel they're adequately addressing additional storm water in the rear through these modifications that they're proposing.
Is that in yellow, is that either French drains or underground?
Yep, there's a couple leaching basins proposed specifically in the rear There's some existing ones already in the front of the home. And then some French drain around the sport court to capture the water. Any questions?
Questions for Leah? Thank you. The applicant has any comments or support for the application we've not already heard?
As I mentioned, my name is Caitlin Faria. I'm with KFLA Landscape Architecture. This is my colleague.
Good evening. Dan Delphos, owner of Ultra Professional Outdoor Services.
Thank you, Eric and Leah, for the reviews. I guess we want to start out with commenting on the fence, most importantly, that Planning Commission had approved last week. So the big draw with this fence that we proposed around the court was mainly for the sound attenuation properties of it. Now, this product has not been used in Oakland County yet, but the reason we proposed it was because of the sound attenuation levels it can achieve. So you mentioned that pickleball is kind of a contentious issue. I've been before you a couple times with these multi-use sport courts. I understand that it is contentious. However, proposing this product, we're hoping that can help kind of ease your mind when it comes to approving the sport court location. So the product that we're proposing is called Pickle Glass. So it actually has a half inch or 7 millimeter thickness to the glass. So not only the thickness of the glass, but also the way it is structurally designed with the steel beams. You can achieve a 50% sound reduction within these specific frequencies of the balls hitting the court. So the primary purpose of this sport court will be basketball. Our homeowner's an avid basketball player, so that'll be the primary sport on this court. However, it could and will be used as a multi-surface or multi-use court. So this glass, I can read you a little bit from a third-party acoustic report from the company if you're interested in hearing about that and how it has a 50% sound attenuation property if you're interested.
I think we have.
But otherwise, we have the report if someone would like to look through it.
Is that different from the report? We've got that report.
You have this one?
Yeah.
Okay, so the pertinent parts are highlighted, so if you, I can pass it along if you'd like, but we just want you to take that into consideration. I think that's a reason why Planning Commission also approved these proposed elements with that condition because of the sound attenuating properties of the fence. So we're here to answer any other questions you may have. I do want also to note one last thing is we hope you'll take into consideration the unique properties of the fact that the portion of the road, half of that private roadway is considered against the homeowners with landscape open space. So it's actually almost 5% of their landscape open space is made up of the private road, which is unique. There's only, I believe, one other property like this in the city, within the city, that the homes are part of the landscape open space includes the road. So this is a unique element. So we just wanted to mention that the variance would actually, if you kind of exempted that 5% of the road, would really only be just over 8%. So we're happy to answer any additional questions.
I've got some questions on the glass wall, and I'm glad Mr. Madigan's here because at the Planning Commission there was some discussion about whether the property owner would want to reduce the level of the walls. I mean, first it was proposed 10, 8, and 4, and then the approved was 6 all the way around. But if I'm remembering correctly, there was some, we didn't know whether the property owner would elect to reduce the size of the height of the wall from 6 to something less. And my recollection was that it was pretty clear the Planning Commission approved it at 6 feet. But Mr. Madigan, is 6 feet the level that you anticipate, assuming that the ZBA approves your petition, would construct the wall at 6 feet and no less?
You mean the perimeter?
The
around-
perimeter
not-
glass
not the-
wall.
Not the wall itself. It does not have.
Well,
to
it
be
is,
that high.
is there a distinction? Because I thought it's just the glass wall, right?
There's a frame around it.
Yeah, the glass wall would be the 6 foot.
Yeah.
height.
Right, okay, so I didn't
It
mean.
does not-
And that was the condition.
Well, but would it be lower? Because the point, a point of it is sound mitigation. So presumably if it's lower, that would allow sound to escape. If it's at 6 feet, presumably, that would mitigate the noise that would emanate to your neighbors from pickleball. So I'm just, the question is, do you have any plans to construct a perimeter wall lower than 6 feet?
No. No, but to be as forthright, the court is lower than at least by 2 feet, 3 feet in, where the
That's
court
right.
there.
Yep.
If the cut and fill were lower, the court could sit lower. In essence, you're talking about a natural screening of it. So the sound, the soil itself, it would be encompassed by the surrounding soil or the grounds around it. So if the fence is lower to the court level, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't exceed the height of what your view would be, what your line of sight would be. But I do agree with the noise. I feel like I would rather screen it with, I don't wanna look at that in my house, honestly. And I'm probably saying more than I need to say. I'd rather look at green trees and buffer the noise by the court sitting lower and be wrapped with natural trees and things that I've already planted between on each side to be able to screen from the neighbors' houses and we haven't done it behind yet because, but without getting too detailed, the genesis of all of this was number one, our pool was stable. Number one, really, we had water in the house from the front and on the sides. Dan came, helped us and abated all those issues at the front. So we moved and cleaned those things up. He helped me to understand that in order to move forward, our number two thing was the pool and the pool deck. So the beginning of all of this was we needed to replace the pool decking. The steps down to the pool are failing. It's dangerous. It's unsafe. I want to remove as soon as we can and replace. That's all in the plan as well, without getting too far ahead. I also bought the home with the existing sport court, in my mind, not in compliance. So when that was brought to my attention, I said, well, we'll do everything in compliance. There's no reason not to be compliant. I want to be a good neighbor. I'm thankful I've got great neighbors in my neighborhood and throughout. So what do we need to do to be a good neighbor? Well, the existing sport court was in our condominium associations over the
Easement.
the easement. I said, well, that doesn't make sense to put it in the easement. We should move the court and make it compliant. But if we're gonna move the court, I'd rather make it larger so it's more purposeful for basketball and other things we could do. And the only way to do that is to move it in and then move it down. So if we moved it in and moved it down, that's when I said to Dan, and he had great ideas. He said, well, I don't want this driveway as big as it is anyway. Let's reduce the driveway. Let's get a lot of the hardscape out. So at least if there's a potential to increase the size of the court, we would have at least accounted for as much as we could in that. Ideally, the lower it is and the more naturally it's landscaped and keeps the noise in is what I would prefer than building something that is too, I don't want to say an eyesore because it's glass, it's clear. But I would much rather see that wrapped on the three sides, that it sits lower and it's concealed by 4 feet of changing grade. And then the trees on top of that would buffer it far more than any 4 foot, 6 foot, 8 foot fence ever would in terms of noise.
Okay, well, just, and thank you for that, but just so I'm clear and the record's clear. A 6 foot tall glass structure, right? Forget about how much the court might be lowered. Forget about landscaping, focusing only and solely on the height of the structure, the glass structure of the wall. Is it your plan to have your contractors build it at a 6 foot height uniformly around the court?
It would be no less than 6. Correct.
Thank you. Perfect. Anybody have
And
any
no
questions?
more than 6.
Yeah, no more.
And
than
no
six.
more than 6.
No, you have to do.
Anybody have any more questions? Anybody in the audience that I don't see have any questions? Okay, thank you. Joey, you guys have anything more to add?
like
I
that.
I would just like to say, you know, back in June or July, the Madigan family now is contracted to make some changes and identify some problem areas. One was water was getting in the basement. We dug a little deeper, we found a breach in the foundation where animals were getting into the home. We continue to uncover several problems. Drainage was one of them, impervious space was another one. We made a lot of improvements. There was several things that we found underground during this digging process to look for these breaches. We found utilities that were just subsurface, gas lines, electrical lines. We pulled the appropriate permits, worked with the city to get those professional contractors out there to take care of that. So the Madigan family has approached this the professional way, asking for permissions, pulling the proper permits, and going through this process. It's been a lengthy process for them, and my job is to do a design that would be appropriate for the family. They're very active and athletic. They use the lower level the most, and that's how they approach the pool deck. From the pool deck, that's where they would approach the sports court. So they've got grandkids and children that come out to play, and we just want to get this project started with your permissions.
And Mr. Madigan, speaking personally, I can appreciate and thank you for pursuing the permits and doing it the right way, because that, as we know, doesn't always happen. So it's appreciated.
And kudos on the driveway reduction to try and make it more compliant.
Which was over 3,000 square feet,
Yeah,
may I
3,000
add.
square feet.
So, size of the house.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody want to make a motion?
Sure. I move to approve a variance from section 24-229B1 and section 24-196 in order to allow a 20-foot setback in lieu of the required 50-foot setback along the western portion of the property line for a sports court in the rear yard, to allow a 24-foot 9-inch setback in lieu of a required 26-foot setback along the north property line, and to allow for 66.24% landscaped open space instead of the ordinance required 80%. In this case, the applicant has demonstrated practical difficulty for the following reasons. Strict compliance with the requirements would unreasonably prevent or severely limit the owner from improving the property, as the existing landscaped open space is an existing non-conformity. The requested variances would be do substantial justice to the property owner as well as other property owners, as it would permit a home consistent with the other homes in the neighborhood. The property owner has worked with the city to reduce the size of the variances requested and remove portions of their driveway to increase the landscaped open space on their property. 3, the plight of the property owner is due to the uniqueness of the property. The property starts at a deficit when it comes to landscaped open space, unlike new builds within the city. 4, the proponent's problem is not self-created, and in that the property is non-conforming when it comes to increased landscaped open space requirement, and the property owners had limited ability to increase the amount of landscaped open space while improving their property. 5, the granting of the variances will not adversely affect the purposes or objectives of the master plan. The purpose of the master plan in residential areas is to allow homeowners the opportunity to improve the property while minimizing impact on their neighbors. In this case, it's a special merit here because this owner is trying to figure out how to mitigate noise attenuation in the area as well.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations. And that concludes this evening's meeting of the ZBA.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
I just want to know what all these